Okay, we got some wheat here, and we're gonna just put it in the grinder. And it takes kind of a long time to grind this. You've got a couple of different options here. It goes from the coarse all the way to the finest one, and I actually like it on the finest. So it takes a long time to just wait for it to get so fine, or it could go really quick if you just could tolerate the coarse ground, but I want the fine stuff, so I'm gonna just start grinding. And now we're just gonna take the top off and get the flour out and start our bread. And then I'm going to just sit it right here because it's messy and you don't want to sit it on the countertop or anything like that. But then we've got our flour, see? And it's very fine, really nice ground flour. And I need 10 cups of flour to make a loaf of bread. And not a loaf of bread, but a batch of bread. So I'm gonna measure out 10 cups of flour. And it just so happens that I found this at the dollar store, but this container holds exactly 10 cups. So I can just fill this to the top and it's exactly 10 cups. So now what's gonna happen is after I have the flour, I'm gonna mix up all the ingredients for bread, and I'm going to put it in each of these little baggies. And the reason why I do that is then I can just take the baggie out and store these, and this is everything minus the flour. So later I come back, I want to make bread, I just add water. So I'm going to have my, I personally like to have my flour freshly ground. So I'm going to wait and grind the flour right when I'm making the bread. So I keep the flour out and I just have everything minus the flour in these baggies. And so suppose I do all 5 of these jars and have 5 baggies, that means for 5 weeks I can go ahead and make bread and not have to get all the stuff out first. But this is just to show you real quick, these are the bins that I would use to make bread. I've got my salt and my yeast, my bean powder that goes in. Another bin that has all the dough enhancers. So you can buy dough enhancer already made, or you can look in the cookbook and there's ways to make your own dough enhancer. But you can add vital wheat gluten, and you can add, this is lecithin, ascorbic acid, calcium carbonate. There's all kinds of things that you can add. You could add potato flakes. Some people add ginger or garlic. Each one has its own thing that it does to bread, and it'll affect the flavor a little, but it'll also affect the rise or how well it rolls out, and it changes things. So that's the fun part about bread, is that you can experiment, and every time you make it, you can make it a little different. And then with the same exact baggie full of stuff, you can make white bread with white flour, or freshly ground flour and whole wheat bread. Same baggie could be used to make Ezekiel bread and grind up the freshly sprouted grains and make Ezekiel bread. When you're looking at the recipe, one of the first things you need to do if you're going to make 5 or 6 batches ahead is figure out what you might not have enough of. And so if I turn and I look at this, I guess I'd be concerned that I don't have enough bean powder. So I'm going to start with bean powder and see how far I get before I add all the other ingredients and then get to one jar that doesn't have enough stuff. So I'm going to start with bean powder and fill up all the jars with that first. Half a cup of bean powder in each one. Now if I didn't have enough bean powder, I'd just go ahead and grind some more. But for right now, I luckily had enough ground ahead because I made waffles. And the waffle mix calls for bean powder too. Then I'm going to add the next thing, honey powder, salt, and I'll just go across and add them all to each baggie. One thing that's kind of interesting is I go ahead and use ascorbic acid, and it calls for a pinch of ascorbic acid. And so I literally just take a pinch with my fingers and I pinch a little bit in each one. And the ascorbic acid is supposed to help it rise, and it also helps it stay good longer. And that's one of the problems you have when you're making your own bread, is there's no preservatives in it at all. And so you have to eat it pretty quickly or keep it in the freezer. So with ascorbic acid, it's supposed to help it keep a little bit longer. Now once you get the jar so full, or the baggie so full, you might want to just kind of tap it and get it to go down so it'll fit more in there. So the last final thing is to add the calcium carbonate, and it doesn't have to have calcium carbonate, but I just wanted to add it because I found out that BYU was adding it to cookies in order to help with osteoporosis in third world countries in South America. And so I am going to go ahead and add a tablespoon of calcium carbonate to my bread. I want my kids to be strong and healthy too, so I just go ahead and add it. And then the yeast is the last thing, and so if we want to add the yeast, people have told me it's best to add the yeast separately. So you could measure it out and put it in a snack baggie and have it with this baggie, or you could just measure it out as you make each batch of bread. But so I'm not going to add the yeast right away because I guess the yeast and the salts and the different things in the mix might fight with each other, and then you wouldn't get a good rise. So we can add yeast separately in a baggie, or separately just as you're making it, or take your chances and go ahead and throw it in there, which I have done, and it seems to work just fine, but other people have said it doesn't rise as well. So those are some of the thoughts about making mixes for bread. I press all the air out of the baggie, and I ziplock it, of course, really firmly. Then I stick it in a container, and here now I've got 10 baggies ready to go for bread mix. Then I put a lid on. I call it bread mix. When I want to make bread, there it is.